All right, welcome back to the Focus Podcast. Iliya Vukadinovic. We are here at episode number 43.
Wow.
Holy shizer.
It's a great number.
We've done it. Yeah, it is a great number.
Nice little room you got.
Up in the 40s, we get there. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah.
Cheers.
My pleasure.
Salute.
We always have good conversation.
Yeah, we do.
As you do.
I had Tim here on last episode of the Focus Podcast. I had
the Bad Meat Band?
Tim here, part of the Bad Meat Band that you're part of.
Oh, yeah.
And we were talking about, a lot of copyright stuff and ownership and stuff like that. And I've just been recently tidying up a lot of my stuff and realizing that I'm missing so much stuff. It's crazy with like ownership, what you can, as long as you own all your creativity, there's so much revenue you can create from it, and also like so much that you're missing out on that you're not aware of.
Yeah, I think it's a really big blind spot for a lot of artists, myself included. So I'm not sure if it's like the greatest leap off topic, but we can chat about it. What'd you learn?
No, I just learned that like there's a lot there. Yeah. Like it's a job in its own. It's its own entity, like every aspect of this independent music, adventure. It's a whole job on its own.
Yeah. It's another one of those hats that people are expected to, not even expected. It's just sort of like the way that things have shaken out. You kind of have to wear so many hats.
Yeah.
Your neck is going to break.
Well, what do you find the most daunting? Like because out of, you got to play, you got to rehearse, you got to, take time for shows, you got to record, you got to promote, you got to, so like what's...
Well, the promotion side of things, I don't think it was easier when I was younger. And there was more of like a team feel to some of the projects that I was working on at that time. We come up with some interesting ideas on how to promote and things like that, but it became pretty clear after moving to Toronto that it was really hard to get people out, especially in the wintertime, to shows. And then you kind of battling the opposite effect in the summertime where people have their own plans, they're going out of town and whatnot. So everyone can show up to the gig without a coat, which is nice, and everyone loves that in the summertime. But a lot of people are off at the cottage, and that's great too. I would say that the rehearsal aspect of things
just gonna close the door.
Has kind of taken a bit of a backseat this year, at least. It was a backseat for a long time while I went back to school and decided to not change directions, but really just kind of buttress my life with some kind of support and just a very different career path than I had initially aimed for.
Do you mind scooching in a bit?
Yeah, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, that'll get closer to the mic. So that, like, you're acupuncturist now, so how is that what you're talking about? Like,
yeah. So it is. I mean,
when did that come about? Was that lockdown thing? Because I just met you a few years ago.
No, I started doing that before lockdowns.
Okay.
And you and I met a long time ago, though. I think.
I know.
Similar to someone else I was listening to on your podcast. We also met at the Painted Lady. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 100 times.
You meet all your podcast guests at the Painted Lady, and then 10 years later, you do your.
That was the plan all along. That was
the slow play.
It's worked. Yeah. But basically, that's what I was saying to Tim. It's like when you see somebody out of out of the same different environment. Because I worked with Tim before on Blue Jays, and then I met him at Grossman's.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's because. So what I'm saying with you is that. We've met before, but then we met in a different context. But it was still music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we reconnected 2021, I think.
Yeah, I think when we're finding places to do. To go play music. And you guys...
Yeah, it was in the alley. It was the team in the alley there. And we were playing some shows there.
Anyway,
But
so the acupuncture,
like I said, like that whole rehearsal aspect of things, and really kind of being in a rhythm with a specific group of people, that took a back seat in my second year, because I did try and do it all in the first year, and I kind of burnt myself out. That was the first time that I experienced what that was really like, because I was training very hard in the martial art that actually brought me to studying acupuncture, and I was not relenting or listening to my limitations, my body's limitations, and all the while I was playing bass with Marlon Chaplin, which was loads of fun. Do actually miss that, and did a couple overnight recording sessions with Eric Frisch, and I've always been keeping the ball rolling with the Ronci Boys to some degree, and so I was juggling all of these things. I think there's another project in there in the mix as well, and it all came to a head. So after that, I took a step back from like requiring myself to be chomping at the rehearsal side of things, booking another show, et cetera, et cetera. I really decided I had to focus on getting this license and understanding the field of Chinese medicine to the best of my ability at the time. But to, get back to your question, I think the hardest thing for me has probably been the social media side of things all the time. Where I look back and I look at it and I go, man, if we had just been like a little bit more reckless with our social media when we were first, and I'm talking like things were still bleeding edge. It was like 2012.
Oh, I kicked myself so much.
we could have
YouTube channel alone.
Yeah, we could have dominated portions of the internet space, and I'm not so sure that would be like the most comfortable thing to be trying to sustain or maintain now. But at least it would have.
You'd be making a good living.
It would have played out differently for some of the projects. But music to me has for a long time now been something that I do more for the expressive aspect of it and the fun. I really don't see the point in doing it if it's not fun. That's why I enjoy playing with you. It's a lot of fun. You guys don't really rehearse. I'm always like, hey, can I get a little can I get a little lead on some of these pieces? And it's like, no,
yourself.
Go read the bass player's fretboard. Yeah. That's fine.
Look around.
I like it. Yeah, and it's good because I went from playing a lot of guitar when I first moved to Toronto to playing a lot of bass, which taught me a lot about music that I didn't know that I had to learn. I think it ultimately made me a better guitar player. And now coming back to playing typically more guitar when I do get around to performing with people, I can pay more attention to rhythm sections in a different way, and also just quicker garner the information that I need to in order to stay on the same page.
Stay on the track, yeah. So where did your I like the correlation you have with the name of your acupuncture.
Oh, thank you.
Very music based.
So instrument of life.
Yeah, and I wanted to say because I feel like yoga and like getting in shape again has really helped me been able to sustain all this music stuff. Like to juggle all that. Like just right before you were talking, you were saying like you're trying to do all these projects and then it came like it imploded on you. But so I'm assuming that like after you got your acupuncture stuff off the ground and started rolling, and that became more of a balance tool for you to redo music projects again. For me, I'm just assuming. Oh yeah. I just myself, it's like I feel like especially coming out of the lockdown without like getting back in shape and yoga and stuff like that, I don't think I'd be able to balance. I'd be able to take on all this music projects and it's more of like training for it.
Being in shape is super important. It's a different that's a phrase, right? Being in shape is kind of like, I guess it can be kind of pressure inducing, or it feels like it is for some people. Yeah. Because there's this idea that they want to live up to a standard or an idea in their mind. And it's good to have that because then you have a goal. But really, in the context of Chinese medicine, at least insofar as I understand it, being in shape is being able to actually listen to your body's limits. It doesn't mean that you can lift the heaviest thing in the gym. It doesn't mean that you have the strongest muscles. It means that as far as your whole body systems are concerned, you're not sacrificing or taxing one system in order to leverage another one.
It's almost the reverse. Yeah. It's the reverse, because you're putting in minimal amount of time. Mostly, if you put in like 15 minutes of workout a day, you're golden.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you put in that time, and then it's almost like you're doing less work for your body, because the more out of shape you are, the harder your body's going to work and have to work in fighting that, right? So
yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
I think I was listening to something too recently, and I'm terrible for, I'm just this fire hose of information that comes from the internet, so I don't know where what the name of this
like,
this podcast that I was listening to. But it made me reassess how I was training in terms of just trying to keep a baseline level of fitness, and actually dropping from trying to do too much every day or 6 days a week to taking the pressure of the expectation off and saying, well, I'm going to do something focused like 2 days a week. And it's amazing how quickly you see a change, because your body gets the time to rest. If it's something like 15 minutes a day, then I would say that's kind of part and parcel of moving around and being mobile and not being just like so stagnant that you end up developing pain and problems. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a routine that you do every day for a short period of time. But if you're doing stuff where you're actually like including resistance training and going for some type of growth or some type of like recomposition and things like that, then you really do have to give your body enough time to rest and recover. And a lot of people don't do that. And I've realized that in my work now, is that the modern pace of things really puts a lot of pressure on people to deliver. Doesn't really matter what field they're working in. There's a lot of expectations and pressure, and they kind of we take that upon ourselves, and then we kind of allow it to, or it's not that we allow it. It's just that it kind of by its nature, it stresses our systems so much that we end up in a situation where we're confused. Like, why is this happening? Like I've always had control over how I'm feeling or whether I'm digesting well or whether I'm able to sleep. And then all of a sudden something goes and slides, and it's no longer something that you can just say, okay, I run my life this way, and therefore I'm going to fall asleep within 30 minutes of lying down or whatever. It's like, now you have this insomnia thing and you don't understand why. And it's like, that's where alternative medicine is really, really helpful, because it has these other explanations for why these things happen. But the reason that we got onto this was, I think, the name. You pointed out the name, and yeah, I couldn't help but kind of try and stitch my life together in a way. Because actually, I was looking at an acupuncture needle one time before I had fully realized that I was gonna name whatever
really
company.
Metaphorical. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of reasons actually.
No, it's great. I like
it's got
it.
Layers.
Yeah.
So I was looking at an acupuncture needle, and I think I had just finished restringing a guitar or something. And if anyone's seen an acupuncture needle up close, you'll know that it's like a shaft of steel, and then there's a coil around the end. So it looks a lot like a coiled kind of guitar string, especially those D'Addario ones with the you got the end. They let the hex core kind of pokes out from the rest of the coil. And then I think that was part of the kind of like, oh yeah, okay, there is a
the light bulb goes.
Multi-layer kind of connection between these things. Initially, it was actually because one of the ways that one of my professors, who I still work with, he's now my coworker, or colleague, I should say, and he likened performing acupuncture or helping someone to the best of your ability in that moment as likened it to kind of tuning an instrument. And I thought it was interesting that this 6-string instrument, the guitar that I'm so familiar with, had this kind of parallel with one of the primary kind of theories of Chinese medicine that has 6 channels. So there's some channels are longer and some channels, so you could say that's like a lower string, and some channels are shorter and more on the kind of inner aspect of the body, and so there's kind of acting like the higher strings.
Yeah.
And so if you've noticed too, if you've ever, I mean, this is getting really kind of nerdy, but you guitarists out there, I guess, would kind of like it. But if you have a floating bridge on your guitar and you tune one of your strings, or you put it in drop D, well, all your other strings are going to go out of tune. Yeah. So a lot of times, the ways that our body carries load on muscle chains and tendon chains in our body will have an effect on the other ones. So, you know, positionally, if you just are posturally behaving differently, and with enough repetition that it builds up a certain amount of tension or stores enough load in those muscle channels, then that'll have a wide-ranging effect. First, it'll be kind of like a physical kind of, oh, ow,
yeah, this
hurts over here, or there's an issue over there kind of effect, but then it can actually start to affect the organ systems, because naturally the organs are connected to these muscle chains and fascia pathways that bear the load.
Yeah, and also I learned a lot about it quickly because just, you know, my physical demand for my job and stuff like that. And then I think I was trying to hone in on something you were saying there, where people just go, and you live that life, and especially when you're young, you just like take on so much,
take it for granted, yeah,
shit, and then one day it just comes to like a screeching halt, and then you're realizing, oh shit, this affects this and this affects this, and I was gonna touch on something you were saying. People, there's no stopping, because just like we were talking about like
the requirements,
hypermedia, where just like everybody in every line of work is just, the demand is higher and higher and higher, where these last few years I'm just looking for ways of like buying more time. You know what I mean?
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, exactly. In a way where you don't want to stress those limits as much as possible. You want to just do little chunks of it, so you don't get to those points where it's too much. So in my experience, it's almost like if you practice every day, when the game comes, you're like ready. So to me, a lot of people are living their lives frantically by just putting fires out here and here and here and there. But I've kind of developed this practice of like 5 tasks a day, an hour each.
Yeah, I've heard you talking about this before. Yeah.
So that's really, really helped me out. So when, everything piles up, things aren't as daunting. Like, I've taken care of a few things, but then I'll look at it at a different way, saying like, hey, these tasks are daunting, but I got to chip away at it. And it's the same thing as like looking at your health in the long run. So it's like, if I work out 10 minutes a day, I take care of myself, I prepare myself, eat well, then when things get frantic, my body's not going to shut down. So my body's like well tuned to go into the high, the high octane, right? So it's I like what you're saying. I have this book that I was mentioning to you before, but this is the one I was talking to you about. This is all the meridian lines and
fascial anatomy,
fascia and all that.
This reminds me a little bit of something that I'm pretty interested in lately, called fascia flossing.
She was talking 100% about that.
Really related to the TCM or the Chinese medicine channels and pathways and things like that. And there's various theories and practices out there. One of the things that brought me, like I said before, one of the things that brought me to my career was a martial art. And I think it's funny because there's a saying that I recall my sifu, Ali Siadatan of Wuxing martial arts. He said one time, and it's not like he came up with it. He used it as an after class kind of thought one time. That is, first there is a mountain, and then there is no mountain, and then there is. And that's funny because that's actually a Donovan lyric.
Sounds like a mental thing, like a big mental hurdle.
It's a perspective kind of thing, and it's but Donovan uses that in a song First there is a mountain, then there is no mountain,
like
then there is.
Yeah.
Your AV guy is kicking in.
Yeah, no, I'm the only worker.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There we go. That's better.
So,
Sorry, folks.
so that phrase can have so many different kind of multiplicities of meanings.
Mm-hmm.
Where, and the way that he was explaining it that day was like, yeah, you go into a martial arts class and you kind of have this idea when you arrive and you're really green and it's your first week or two or whatever, and you're like, yeah, I know how to throw a punch. And then they're like, okay, well, like punch this sandbag that's attached to the wall. And you're like, okay. And you do it and your wrist folds and you're like, wow, it kind of hurt. And then you thought, wait, I thought I could hit like a lot harder than this. And naturally your instructor will be like, okay, well, you know, that's good, but let me show you a couple mechanical things that will really help you.
There's a lot of stuff that
yeah,
adds
so you
up
got to
to
slow
just,
everything down
yeah.
and kind of like think about, okay, where's my foot? Where's my
Yeah.
back foot? Turning my hips,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And so you kind of get lost into you get into the weeds a bit
Yeah.
with it. And you're now you're training and you're thinking about where your foot is and you're not thinking about hitting something. And so you come kind of like information, there's so much more information that your brain has to keep track of, your nervous system has to keep track of. Then it starts to become automated again. And now when you throw the punch, you just do all of that sort of kind of rationally or subconsciously. And it all just kind of happens because it makes more sense and it's more ergonomic and there's more momentum that you can use, that you can extract out of your own geometry. The other way that phrase is kind of thought of in a philosophical sense is that you have some big problem and you're like, oh, it's looming and it's this big problem in the distance and it's like this huge mountain that you have to climb. Then when you start getting into it and you start like setting things up about it, or it could be anything. It could be like you're tackling some new venue that you haven't had a show in before, and there's all these specific things that need to be done, and you're 6 months out and you're like, wow, it seems like impossible, but then the show starts to take shape and then you start doing little things
off, yeah.
and you're kind of approaching the mountain and you are seeing that now it's not just a big blob. There's like rivers
to it, yeah.
that you got to like get across,
Yeah.
and you have to get
That's a
through
good way
this
of looking at it.
forest, and you have to get through these boulders and all this stuff, and then you come to the top of it, the event happens or whatever it might be, and then you kind of come down the other side, and then when you look back, it's just a mountain again. So it's like at first it starts out as it's just a punch, and then you have all of these things that you have to actually integrate, and you do that, and then you look back again and you're like, well, it's just a punch. It's just that now you operate differently.
Yeah.
So
with all the other elements involved with it.
yeah, there's really big benefits to being a lifelong someone who's interested in learning for your entire life. And I don't think I anticipated being that kind of person, especially not when I was in my early 20s or anything like that. Maybe I had different ideas about what I'd be learning about.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, everything starts to take shape. I can say for sure that 5 years ago, I was like, how am I going to make this work? Like playing music and doing acupuncture and having, other aspects of my life that somehow seemed incongruent. And then you just sort of find your way through it. Yeah. And as you're going, you meet the challenges that come along, and then everything integrates, and you kind of move forward and you go, okay, yeah, I have time for this. I don't have time for that. And maybe I don't have time for this right now, but I'll have time for it later. And it's not, sometimes people, I think, take things and go like, well, if this doesn't happen right now, then it's never going to happen.
I'm on a roadblock.
I don't really have that approach to life in general, especially when it comes to musical projects, because I had enough of those kind of come and go over the years that I learned to enjoy what I can from them, and really just kind of try to take a lot of the pressure off. But sometimes I will admit that does sometimes make me work really slowly because there's, who needs deadlines?
Well, you have to make your own deadlines,
Yeah,
and you
right.
have to you have to hold yourself accountable too, to like make
For
these
sure.
deadlines that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, no, it's a good mindset, because I find that a lot of people, it comes down to that song, Comfortably Numb. You work so hard to get to a certain spot, and then you're like, oh, I've achieved this mountain, like you were saying, and then maybe they don't look at for another mountain. Not that you have to continuously chase these kind of goals, but especially people in our age, you know, you get comfortable in a certain position, and then you just kind of coast, and nobody learns anything anymore. It's like you always have to constantly learn, whether it's for yourself, for your health, for your career, for your, you know, interests and hobbies and stuff like that. And it's just growth in life in general. Like if you want to, you know, have a more fulfilling life, then you should be willing to learn more.
You can't be stuck in a zone of total comfort. Nothing will
even in a bad way, both
in
negative and positive, right? Where it's just like if you're doing well and you just kind of don't make any changes, or you don't see, you don't get ready for any foreseeable changes. You're like, oh, the weather's great, it's like everything's gonna be great. And the same thing about you know, being comfortable in a negative situation where you just have enough that you're satisfied, you know what I mean? But you're not going to take a risk. You're not going to take an extra effort to, you know, maybe go into the unknown, and maybe that might be something better in your life. You know what I mean? So, I've always been like that. I've always been, maybe it's not like, maybe it's just like being, not satisfied. It's not, that's the wrong term. Not settling, you know what I mean? Like, oh, okay.
Or just curious.
Yeah, that too. Also, and not be afraid to go in a different direction and kind of fail completely. Or not fail completely, but strike out a few times. Like you were saying, like some people just fail and then that's it for them. They're like...
Or something doesn't come to fruition and they
lose momentum with that.
Well, and they'll just cut it out and say like that's
instead of looking at it in the perspective of saying, well, okay, maybe it wasn't this right time for it. Maybe we can come back to that. And no, there's a lot to be said with that in health and in music. There's parallels to that, and I kind of look at that like I was talking about how like an album's produced too. I think I was talking to Brian last time. We were talking about how quickly music's put out. And there isn't enough, maybe there is, and not being judgmental to all music production, but it's like there's not enough of that breathing time to give it a break and then go back to it and have a fresh look at it before you complete projects, you know, where the mindset is just cranking songs out. And the point of like, oh, I got one song a month, but I'm not really ironing stuff out, you know. It's more about quantity now than quality, where a lot of people don't focus on the full album or you know, take that extra care with songs anymore, you know?
I can totally see what you're saying. Like my musical journey included started with a band called the Dreadful Starlings that actually I had back in Alberta. And big shout out to Tim Clark, if he ever sees this. And Jenna Stroutman and Steve Asselbergs. We had a band out there, and you know, crazy decision. We all decided to move to Toronto, and it went. You know, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of shows, and eventually that iteration of the band broke up. I tried to kind of continue it on with different members, and I always wanted it to be kind of like a thing where there could be one primary songwriter, but really every one except the drummer. I mean, he could write songs if he wanted to be like, you know, Ringo did it, so whatever. But everybody could contribute material to it. And yeah, I was still working on that project a little bit before I went to school. But now I've kind of like, you do have to move on from things eventually. And it wouldn't make sense to try and resurrect that project at all. It was what it was when it was. Yeah. And there's other things to work on now. So eventually, I mean, yeah, I played with a lot of people. not more than the average musician. I think if every musician thinks about it, they've probably like taken some gigs, and you take a gig now and then that you think would just be a one-off. Yeah. And the next thing you know, you're playing with that person for years.
Yeah.
That's how it happened with Marlon. Yeah. I played with him. I filled in, and then it was, do you want to play the next gig? And then after that, it was everything else, right? So I also played with Jessica Speziale for a long time, and cut my teeth, and thanks to her for her patience and letting me learn how to play bass while I was playing in her project, and shortly after that started playing with the Ronci Boys, which oddly enough has been probably the longest running project that I've ever been in. It's taken breathers at time, but right now, kind of what made me think of them and this whole sort of my backstory, they have a ready-made catalog that they've had these songs for ages, and they've still been somewhat prolific about pushing out some new material throughout the time that I've been with them. But for the most part, they had most of all of their repertoire done by the time I joined the band. And so I just thought, okay, well, fun, crazy shows, fun music. And after a while, I finally convinced them, like, hey, I got this little studio in my backyard. Like, why are we not recording these songs? And finally it came down to it. We hadn't really gotten much of that done. We used that space more for rehearsal than for recording. And then when the lockdowns hit, me and Christian Aldo, we just kind of decided, let's just
hammer it.
Let's just do it. We have we have to have something to do every week to not just pass the time, but to feel like we're getting something done.
Yeah, get something.
And so now, ironically, like we did get a lot done in bursts of time, and then there would be times where we would have to spend more time kind of on the editing side of things. Mm-hmm. And this album has taken way longer than any album should ever take. But I'm really happy with the final product, and I hope I'm not leaking it. But it's called Battle Lines, and they're gonna press it to vinyl, hopefully. Nice. And almost everything is done about it. Well, all my audio work is done, so it's off my hands. I never thought I'd make anything that got put out on vinyl. So great.
Yeah.
And life's full of little surprises like that, and you gotta take the W's, as the Zoomers would say, when you can. I got some Zoomer cousins. I know the lingo a little bit, but yeah, there is something to be said for taking your time with artistic endeavors and with projects in general. Now, when something is being kind of like
there's
or kiboshed,
there's a line between time and procrastination.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And there's also a line between something taking time and people just kind of arguing about
dragging shit on
what needs to,
I think that
the way that it needs to be done.
That delays projects more than anything.
I think it does.
People with disagreements and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's funny because, regardless of what project we're talking about, like people will disagree about stuff that in the long run, I'm just thinking like, man, like stupid. Nobody's going to notice that. It's not even something about the audio. Like you may have an argument about whether this sound or that, the bass line should do this or that in this part of the song. And those are all choices. But sometimes there's like these kind of fine print things that just they really don't matter. And people get really, really, it's very interesting to see people get kind of very fixated on it. But in the end, it always comes out. It always comes out good.
Well, that's a tricky balance with that, and especially with publishing too, with a band and groups and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Publishing and the percentages, divided up, and
yes,
it's interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm just kind of going through my own trial and error. And then somebody I was close to, she had a band, and then she was like, "Oh, we're just gonna split it all 25%."
4-person.
Yeah, and I was like, "That's very noble."
Yeah.
But I was like, "You're writing all the songs. You should have 100% of the publishing, and especially as nobody helping you with it." But that's to each his own. Everybody's their own, whatever they want to work out.
Oh yeah.
So
I have some.
everybody.
I have some.
That's what makes it so interesting and so and like such a huge, daunting subject to go at. Like publishing is just so massive.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I have some percentages of some songs I would argue have nothing to do with the writing of.
Yeah.
I might have something to do with the facilitation of that.
Well, that
being
might have
recorded,
something to do with
and
it.
that may
Yeah.
that's worth.
Well, that's a deal. That's a certain
thing.
deal.
But that's an agreement that you come to as
100%.
like again, music is something that it's not something that I have an expectation of earning because of the the Spotify driven kind of world that we're in right now. I know that there's ways to leverage good music, and I think to me it seems like sync licensing and kind of like connecting with maybe film type
There's
people
entities out
and
there that
game,
are really making
game
good money.
peoples,
Yeah.
People who decide what music is involved in what games. It's like, how many people remember the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 soundtrack, and how many of those bands like would have half, if that, of the number of fans that they had if they hadn't been included on that video game at that time? I mean, that was huge. That was so massive.
Yeah, it's funny because here I can't remember what band it was. I'm so drawing a blank here. Might be, it's not the Killers. It's definitely not the Killers. It's a band, and they're the beginning of one of the NHL EA games.
Oh, okay.
So it's like when you hear that, I always associate it with like that game being on standby for fucking 12 hours when everybody's too hammered, right? Like,
Sure.
So the money imagine the residuals they got just from that one video game alone.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
It's monster.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to what you were saying about taking advantage, because I had to interject, but I just let you finish. The like getting in on YouTube early, and I was in on YouTube fucking early, like I'm talking like 2008, 2009, 2007.
That's
like
just a couple years in.
Yeah, and I actually
2005 was
posted
when it started. So.
I had actually my first video, Piece of Paradise, and then the Diamond Cutter. I had a page, and it got I don't know. Each video had a couple thousand, but it got corrupted. My email got corrupted, and I had to start a new one. So I started a brand new YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Which is, I think I started in 20. This one is I started in 2013, and it was just pretty much, I had a couple of videos that I already had in stock, but it was just dormant for like 2013 to like even right up until my last album release. So it was like, no, I was putting out projects every year, but it was really like 2 videos a year.
Okay.
Like barely using it, and then the lockdown kicked in. I started doing a lot of live streaming, and that's when I started utilizing it. And now it's only been a year where I really like understood what to put into it and like how to work it, and and it's like I could have been way ahead of the curve. Like, it's so long ago. I had such I was associated with CD Baby. So CD Baby had like a side sister company called Rumblefish.
Oh yeah,
and it's not Rumble. It's not Rumble like the competitor to YouTube, but it's called Rumblefish, and basically it paid you for every fucking view you got. So this is before YouTube was even monetized.
Right.
So it was giving you your money already, and regardless if you owned it or whatever, so you were getting the pennies for the views. So you had the option: do you want to monetize this video? Yes or no.
Right.
Without any requirements.
Yeah.
So what you did was you'd say yes, and then when somebody played your video, there'd be a commercial at the beginning. So I was already getting revenue from YouTube like more than 12 years ago, and I fucked up because I pulled my catalog, that first album, from CD Baby, and it fucked that all up. So I made a huge error very early.
Yeah.
And I'm just now getting out of that spider web.
Right.
And I should have left it, because I would have still been qualified as that YouTube. I would have been already, I don't know, maybe I had to do different requirements after they so what happened with YouTube is like, so all these, I guess you want to call it bot accounts started, and people would just rip other people's footage. And
I remember that.
So what YouTube did is they made these new requirements. So now you have to have the 1,000 subscribers, and you have to have X, like 3,000 minutes of viewed time of legit, like can't be from a bot.
Yeah,
like they can sense these the algorithms and the AI in YouTube can sense all this stuff.
Sure.
So so I basically had to kind of reapply for monetization for YouTube. I'm already getting money at the back door because I own a lot of my stuff.
Yep.
But the requirements are so high now to be a partner.
Yeah.
I don't know if the same I think the requirements are the same in the States, but I was talking with a few other, podcast guests I've had about like how Canada's so far behind on that. You see so many people making good money in the States off YouTube, especially. It's just not taking off here like it should.
Right.
And it's I think there's a lot of potential here once that entity kind of shifts focus and like people understand.
Pun intended.
Total pun intended. When people start seeing it as like kind of an musical artist's foundation, you know what I mean? Especially a platform like YouTube, where it's like now you're everything. You're the label. You have everything at your disposal for the viewer. And even like if you have a different practice or something, you can kind of utilize that all together in one platform. And I like what you said about vinyl too, because I'm looking to get into vinyl for this project.
Yeah, I think 10 years ago it would have been a lot either more
crack.
expensive.
You're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, and that's true because the revival hadn't quite hit, or what seems to be the resurgence of people enjoying the physical medium, which I think is great. I think it's pretty funny that it's the largest, most cumbersome, inconvenient one. But hey, we live in a clown realm anyway, so it doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah, nothing makes sense.
But definitely there weren't as many companies around the GTA offering the service. You would have had to definitely have some pretty special connections to get vinyl. I mean, I'm talking if you're just like an indie artist that just decides, the band with no management decides we want to make the vinyl.
You had to make a certain amount of press too. Options. You'd have to at least press.
Yeah, you still have
1,000.
to. You still have to, but it's a fraction of what it was before.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a couple of years ago they opened up 2 plants in Canada, and there's in Ontario making vinyl.
Do you know which company?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of small indie ones
Yep.
that do it. And actually, so that's funny you mentioned that. So my reason for pulling my stuff out of CD Baby, initially they were taking 30% when they first started. So I was like, 30%? Fuck this shit.
That's
but they were reaching everywhere. I was realizing that they were reaching everywhere.
Yeah.
And they were covering publishing too, so you didn't even have to apply for your publishing. So they were covering for your publishing, and they were covering that's the sister company Rumblefish. So they were getting. I wasn't realizing how comfortable I was and how good I was with it. So I panicked with that, and I found a Canadian one, which is Indie Pool.
Yeah, actually, I use Indie Pool for one of the projects.
So. I have my first 2 catalogs with Indie Pool, and what I just realized the last couple of days is that I didn't put my ISWC codes in any of them. I didn't put if it was original work in any of them, and now I've gone back to Sound Exchange, and I didn't even register myself as a performer. So there's just so much. I've written it down. There's like this pie chart of shit, and there should be actually like a checklist. There's this checklist you should do before you even release stuff.
100%.
It's like, first you want to get your stuff registered on SOCAN to get your composition numbers, and then you want to be then your project should be finished. By that time, you'll get those composition numbers, and then you want to register yourself for your own ISRC code and your own like one that pertains to you, and then you want to get what is it? Creative community. You want to get signed up with that, so when you share your stuff, it comes back to you. Like that revenue comes back. And also you want to get signed up with some sort of publishing. So if you're with CD Baby, I think you're automatically signed up through the publishing. But I heard that Songtrust bought CD Baby. So you do your publishing through Songtrust, or unless you want to pay for your own publishing, which is a few grand, I think. Yeah. And then you have your own publishing company, and then whatever you make, you can add to that publishing. And then you want Sound Exchange is the big monolith of it all. Like it's the one in Washington that basically searches free music for anywhere. And so that is tied to whatever country you're from. Right. So if you have your Canada, you have SoCan and all that stuff. And yeah, it's a lot to learn, man. It's so much to learn.
It's a corn maze of
of
stuff.
It's a corn. It's interesting because if you look at the artists that are successful, like in that realm, they definitely have somebody working for them who knows all that shit.
Yes.
And that's a job on its own. So that is a job on its own. The social media thing is a job on its own. It's like reading the analytics of that is like
more hats.
Yeah. But what I've been saying before is that a label is the same thing. A label is like, a dozen people or 20 people that have all these jobs, these tasks, but then they're still giving to the top dog. Like a lot of that, what they work for goes to Sony or the big executives at the top. If you have your own team, you basically are a record label, and you don't have to kick back anything up, Yeah. But it helps being on a label to get reach, like quick reach. But it's exciting nowadays when you see a song just blow up, and when somebody's already covered and they have all that shit taken care of, they're cashing in. Right. Like that. What was that dude? I can't remember his name. He's like a redhead country guy.
The guy who did Richmond, north of Richmond.
Something. Yeah, and he just pulled over to the side of the road and he shot himself with the phone doing this one. Or he had somebody shoot it for him, and then he posted it and it just went completely viral, and all these record labels came to him and like, we'll give you this deal, and he's like, no, I'm good because I'm already registered, and everything that blew up is all 100% of it's coming back to me. Yeah. Well, like, so he got all the money, but then eventually I think he's like, once you get into that machine, it's like, then you got to get a decent publicist, I think if you say no to a PR person.
I think if you say no to enough people, they'll start, they'll find a way to get you on that stage.
But if you find the right people, like if you get the 15 seconds of fame and you find the right people right away, if you get a good, like, if you don't have a label represent you, but you find the right jobs and you pay that person, you could do pretty well and ride that wave.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I look at music as like a great opportunity for yet another stream of passive income, and I also don't fret about the idea that it won't yield much. To me, it's been much more about seeing the people that I work with, seeing their reaction to something that we create, and also being able to listen to it again later and just there's a specific feeling that you get. It's the feeling that you get when you hear, your favorite passage of a classical piece, or your favorite part of a film, where your hair stands on end, and it's like you get a wave of like chills, and that actually has interesting explanations in terms of like in terms of Chinese medicine theory, and even pertaining to Western medicine theory. It's all about hormones and things that change our hormones and hormones change throughout the day, and you can do things to influence your hormones, and if your hormones are out of whack in a certain way, it'll influence your body, right? So, but the how do I get on hormones after talking about why I do music? But this is why I run an acupuncture studio called Instrument of Life, right? I also work at 2 other places too. I mean, I'm trying to juggle as many things as possible, and in that sense, I think that's part of the reason why I feel like something you were saying earlier was like, you go through a period of time where things were on the back burner, and now after, to quote you, you kind of said like I've set things up. Things are always in the process of being set up as far as growth in career goes. So things are at a particular place right now where they're good, and they will be better in the future. So music is occupying that space of like artistic outlet and also joy and fun. And you've caught me at a time, I think, where it's about to go back into a place where I can actually spend time and energy focusing on, or even giving those things the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
Rather than just kind of being like, no, it's not ready yet.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people do.
Yeah.
For a long time. And then even when it is ready, something else can sometimes get in the way of it being properly released, so to speak. And that's just part of, like, you can't get frustrated at the fact that things don't move at the pace that you want them to move. You have to just kind of try and position yourself into a place where when the opportunity comes, then you're able to capitalize on it. And that's kind of like what you're saying with doing all this back end stuff, which is really intelligent. And I'd love to speak with you more about it.
Well, it's the only way that seemed to work for me.
We've chatted a bit about it, but you seem to have been going
trial
down
and error.
Going down the rabbit hole with it.
Well, literally, it's a trial and error of like seeing for what works for yourself. Because to me, I was like, I had a breaking point last year where it was like, I know I had massive amounts of huge projects to do, and it was just like the old additive of like, finish this project till it's done. And then each project, I was so like exhausted at the end that it was, burning myself out with everything. So, and also you want to be in shape every day. So it's like, you can't just like, expect to have energy and not put it in, right? Mm-hmm. So I was using the same adages of working out. So the same as like, finishing an album, or like a huge video project you want to edit, or like doing your fucking taxes. So it's actually started with me, my taxes, and it was like, I'm fucking so daunting. So it started with like, you know what? I'm just going to do an hour of this a day. Because I knew that the dawn was coming in fucking because I'm freelance. Hold on one sec. I'll call her in a second. When I'm freelance, it's like, what was I saying? Freelance?
You're talking about your taxes and
taxes. I was
that
like,
mountain.
Well, that mountain is like so massive I know June, and I've done it to myself where it's like, I've waited too long, and now it's just like I've blown myself out because I have to do 4 hours a day of this shit, So.
That's right. That's me.
Oh, that's you. Yeah. Ever being wanted. So we'll kind of wrap up with this. But what I was saying is that I'm like, okay, I'll just take a little bit at a time. And then what I found was that all the hard stuff was done within 3 weeks. Or a week of burnout. And then at the end of these 3 weeks, I was like, oh, I'm not burnt out. And this massive task is done. Uh-huh. So it's like, let me just apply it to everything. And it's like, well, I'm unemployed. I have nothing to do. So it's just like, okay, I'll do an hour of reading. I'll do an hour of editing. I'll do an hour of this, of health. And I'll do an hour of, creativity stuff. And now I find like I was just knocking off at the end of each month. It was like 4 major projects were done. Yeah. And I wasn't burnt out. So it's a good tactic. It's just finding what works for you.
Yep.
and finding a balance, and finding something that provides health to you, I think, is an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't be like, I tell this to my clients all the time, some of them anyway. We really can't be too obsessed with health. When there's a major problem, you have to throw yourself at making a difference and solving it. But you can't always be, it can't be outcome dependent. So sometimes you have to approach something and just say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow these steps or follow these instructions. And then I'm just going to trust the process. And that's such a cliche thing to say. But sometimes if we're going through something that's like a terrifying change in our health, or a change in life that we weren't quite prepared for, it's like, just slow down, because the worst kinds of decisions that are made hastily. And sometimes you do need to make decisions very, very quickly, but you can't do it when you're in a state of anxiety. And you will be in a state of anxiety if there's a real mismatch between the two main aspects of your body, which are the physical, or your being, I should say, which is the physical and the metaphysical. This obviously gets into like way deeper questions, and people have different beliefs about all these things and how they relate to one another. But one thing is for sure, and that's that if your body is suffering physically, then there may be moments of clarity, but the vast majority of time that you're spending will likely be in a state of heightened anxiety and stress response. So your physical mass has to be taken care of in order for your non-physical mind and sort of spiritual side of things to not just kind of float away and start to disconnect. And then you really get into a lot of problematic, perception disorders and things like that, because you can't just be a bodiless
There's a lot
mind.
out there. There's a lot out there.
We're not a brain in a vat, not yet anyway.
There's a lot out
and
there.
we won't be, because that's AI and how crazy things are getting, and I don't really think it's all that they say it is. I think it's maybe there's some deception going on there.
Oh, definitely.
So
yeah.
But again, that's touching on some other bigger topics and things like that. So
no, there's a lot to talk about, but I'm glad we kind of kept it in this realm of like, the correlation between your practice and music, and I like the way we all kind of like webbed it together.
Yeah, it did take a bit of like a big adjustment, right? Like before, I was able to go, if I wanted to play 3 shows a week, that wasn't a problem. But it is now. I mean, I could probably make it happen, but it would be a very tiring week. So I got to pick and choose when these things are when it makes sense to delve into those things. Yeah. And I do, like I said, it's not only one clinic that I'm working at. That's my own company that I founded last year, early in March, and I was located like at College and Yonge, and now I'm at St. Clair and Yonge, which is a much more peaceful neighborhood. So already there's been a shift in kind of the feel of how I work up there, or how it feels to be working up there. And but I also work in Richmond Hill 1 day a week with a great massage therapist named Paul Detrani, and his clinic is Detrani Proactive Wellness. And I work nearby in the beaches, which is why you and I hang out now and then at Simple Cures, and that's where I work with Richard Kwan and Steve Lee, and they are kind of juggernauts of the Chinese medicine world. As far as I'm aware, there's a lot of really great practitioners out there and stuff, but they have really taught me a lot. So point being is that if you're juggling this kind of work. You are your own boss to an extent. So the buck stops with you, but you're also not just going to the same office every day. And when you're working with people, you're working with them one-on-one. I learn a lot from my patients. I heard a lot of acupuncturists say that when I was in school, and I didn't understand how that could be the case. But when you go through somebody's health history, and then you go through a series of treatments with them, and you see how their particular body changes, and people's health situations can kind of fall into these kind of larger, vague categories, and different people have different speeds of reaction to different types of treatment. So sometimes it's the fact that their body's really stuck, and that's why things won't change. Typically, very young people, everything changes very quickly. Typically, again, on the other side of the spectrum, older people, things don't change very quickly. But sometimes you do have these anomalies of people where you thought, okay, this is kind of a challenging case. Going to do my assessment is this, and I'm going to do the treatment and do the prescription and tell them, A, B, and C, this is what you can do on your own time until you see me next. And then they'll come back and they'll say, it's 50% better already, or even 80% better already. And you'll surprise yourself, and you'll say, okay, so this person had a different capacity for kind of health elasticity than I anticipated. And maybe that's just people or practitioner making a judgment call, or you're taking a guess, because people want to know how long is this going to take. You have to take a guess to some degree when everybody's different. But when it comes to music, I just keep going. I'm looking forward to, might play a gig with you in December.
Get her going.
Get the Roncy Boys record. I'm really hoping will be out in the spring. This other project that I started with Dr. Keys a long time ago now, actually. It's called FUD, and it's all finance related rock, which sounds ridiculous, but some of the funniest and greatest stuff that we've come up with has just come out. It's 2-hour recording sessions, and we go, I don't know, I don't know. 2 weeks later, you listen to it, you go, wow, we really got something here.
Something there.
And that's fun. Those are honestly the things that I do it for. It's not for some outcome related thing that is going to be a disappointment, or that's even going to determine whether or not I continue doing it. I continue doing it regardless of the outcome. At least that's the way that I look at it. Yeah. And sometimes you have to approach health in that way too. You just go through a plateau time and see, I'm not getting the results, but you just keep doing it. Maybe you have to change your approach a little bit, but eventually time is passing.
Yeah, it is.
Things will change.
Speaking of that, I'm getting bombarded with shit here.
Okay.
So I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
Thanks
Focused.
for coming.
You focused on camera, or is it Alex?
Doesn't matter.
All right.
Really doesn't
Man's
matter.
name's Alex. Malacarne.
Hell yeah. Thanks
the
for
Bad Meat
coming,
Band.
buddy. We got lots in the future. We're doing
I'll come back
together,
sometime.
and we'll
be good.
We'll elaborate on some more subjects, and
we'll do an update.
Thanks for coming by.
Great.
Appreciate it, man. Peace, everyone. Have a good night.
God bless.